Welcome to Speechless, the customer experience podcast that leaves us without words. From the amazing customer experiences that we've seen to those cringe-worthy experiences that we all know. We will look at all of these experiences and understand how people are treated by businesses and how people remember those businesses. We won't be mentioning any brands by name to maybe praise the worthy, but to also protect the guilty. I'm Matthew Storm, and I'm speechless. On today's episode, we actually have a special guest today. I have Lisa Fairbanks with me today. She is the head of customer experience solutions at AWS. And, I talk with a lot of people about customer experience and, everything from call centers to surveys and things. And, whenever I met you, I'll have to just confess, I was like, I finally met someone that I felt like we could kind of geek out about customer
Kindred spirits.
Exactly. I know. Because, you and I both have been in this space for a long time. And as we were talking about some of these issues, one of the things that leaves me absolutely speechless is how things are exactly the same. I mean, they haven't really changed much from, the way people did surveys 20 years ago, how they got customer feedback 20 years ago. And that's the theme of today's episode, is actually about customer feedback and listening to our customers. And what I thought we would do is just, first of all, tell me a little bit about your role and what you do for AWS.
Yeah, so I lead the customer experience solutions, as you mentioned. My role is to, understand from our AWS customers, what are they needing and what are they seeking as it relates to improving their end customer experience, whether that's B2B or whether that's B2C. And we identify what are those needs, and then we help them solve for that, whether that be through AWS services or through some of our partners. It's a really magnificent and broad space to be in, obviously, going from analytics and just the insights piece of the story to just the data itself and how do you organize the data, the permissions, privacy, et cetera. So all of those really kind of get bundled into customer experience and how you're handling customer data. So it's pretty broad, get to cover a lot of different industries. And yeah, I've been in this space for quite a while. Started out in marketing, and my very first job was in marketing for doing loyalty for a telco company.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, and it was a survey of all things. And I was so excited to be getting, original customer feedback and how are we going to leverage it. And I will keep the telco company private, but we used it to sell them more stuff. And it was, for me, a little bit disheartening. And it felt like, we could be doing something really authentic here, like truly understanding what customer needs are. And we're just using it as an opportunity to sell them more. So that really, for me, I think it was enlightening, and it was a pivotal moment for what do I want to do in my career in terms of really servicing customers.
Sure. So why don't we start with what does good listening look like? I know I joke oftentimes with my colleagues that I had a grandmother who used to tell me, you have two ears and one mouth, use them proportionally. And so whenever I think about, okay, I need to listen twice as much as I speak, what does listening look like from an organization that's listening to their customers day in and day out?
I think ironically, it's not just the sound. It is even the absence of sound. It is when they're not talking to you. That is, you're listening to your customers because they're not engaging, they're not participating. That is a form of listening itself. I think that good listening is not a project with a start date and end date. It's not a project necessarily just to be budgeted. It is something that has to be ingrained in culture in the ways that we check our email every single day. It is habit, and it is kind of at the core, everybody is getting an opportunity to listen to customers. Again, whether that be through their actions, you can listen to actions, you could listen, audibly. There's multiple facets to it, but being able to even understand the silence is also listening. So I would say that's probably, what does good listening mean? It means every way and every footprint and fingerprint your customer can leave for you, sure. Listening and trying to interpret what is happening there.
Okay. And so let's think about the legacy ways people listen. So let's shout them out together. So we've got surveys. Focus groups.
Small group, yep.
Reviews,
reviews that happen.
Clearly just social media content is often feedback. I think about call centers listening to phone calls and just
someone listening in on somebody else.
Sentiment and behind behaviors and signs that either people leaving or, things like that. You mentioned companies that are primarily listening to upsell. So what are the most common ways that people, when they are listening, what are they listening for?
Well, I guess it depends on the department, right? I mean, I think we could even talk about how different departments should be listening to customers, but we'll take the classic, which might be the call center. They're obviously listening from a quality assurance perspective. Are they collecting the data in the proper way? So that's, I think, most common that we typically see. And then there's sentiment, as you mentioned. So is the mood or is the conversation positive or negative? I think there's a lot of nuance in that, right? Just conversation in general can have a lot of nuance there. They're obviously also, I think, listening for, maybe keywords, right? Things that I know to listen for. So, I mean, again, in my experience, we'll just take pricing as an example. What are customers saying generally around pricing? Because are we in a market where we need to be competitively pricing up or down, whatever that might be? So I think a lot of listening is so very prescriptive, if you will. I know generally what I want to hear. I want to know what I want to know about, if you will. And so I think you and I have talked about this too, Matt, like it's kind of leading the witness. If I know what I want to go listen for, I may not necessarily be getting all of the insight that's coming and I don't know to go listen for.
Very true.
Because I'm very almost, biased from the jump, right? I'm biased from the jump. I know what I want to go hear about. And that I think starts to lay the foundation for where listening has traditionally been. Even in focus groups, right? I think focus groups have a role to play to dive really deep, but it's such a small data set. And you're going to hear a lot of things from a focus group, an hour or 2 hours, lots of dialogue there. But it's the areas that you don't know to ask, right? And even in a focus group, I'm asking you questions that I want to know the answer to. What about all the things I didn't know to ask you, right? Are those the most compelling? So
Sure.
There's, I just think listening in itself is almost a psychology, if you will. There's a psychology to the human, what's happening contextually, and what can we learn out of all of that data that we didn't know to go ask for.
Sure.
I think there's a rhythm of the business, and the rhythm of the business requires understanding what customers are saying about competitors, understanding what they're saying about your products, understanding what they're saying about your pricing. That's the rhythm of the business, and that's necessary. But there's so much more that could be gleaned, and I just don't think enough organizations are thinking about it that broadly.
And what I typically see is that if a project like that is born out of the call center, like you mentioned before, when I led a team of quality professionals that were listening to calls, their primary goal was to catch people doing something wrong. Right? And I'm just, the empathy isn't great. You didn't do this script. You didn't do this well. You didn't repeat that. And it's usually to find someone to beat over the head and like, all right, Lisa, this is how you need to do it better.
Yeah.
One of the things I did with my team is I challenged them to, as you're listening to give feedback to an employee, listen for things that have absolutely nothing to do with the employee. Listen for something that is just a pain point in our business that is, maybe we should go tell someone about that. And so it's not beating Lisa over the head. It's actually like, wow, what if somebody in our website team knew that people talk about how they don't like this page all the time. And usually when calls get recorded, those calls just get saved and they're in an
This
AWS
black hole,
cloud.
yes.
They're in an S3 bucket somewhere, right?
That's right.
And they're just sitting there doing nothing. And I'm just like, okay, there's some insights there. And so when you think about where those projects start, when you say, okay, they're going to collect customer feedback, where do typically projects like that start? Who's actually funding them? And if somebody was listening and they're like, hey, I want to start a project like that, I mean, am I the right person to go secure the budget for that?
Yeah.
Where do those typically start?
I've seen it in multiple areas. I've seen it in marketing, right?
Okay.
Particularly you talked earlier about social media, right? I mean, people, when they comment on social media, it's not about the social media channel or the media, social media support. It is around something that they have encountered with the product, with in store. So I've seen it matriculate from marketing. Like they're capturing all of these insights from a very broad base that has nothing to do with the channel that they're engaging with. That's a great place to start. Competitive intelligence is often one, right? So that might be, maybe that sits in marketing, maybe that sits somewhere else, but competitive intelligence is certainly a place to start. But the contact center is probably the most untapped, I would say, for the reasons you just articulated. Like, we are a support service. Our job is to handle a customer issue, get it resolved, and then move on, and not really considering the richness of the data that you are already collecting, because customers like to talk, or could be collecting. I see so many opportunities. We talk about a support service being overhead, and then, so how do we turn it into a profit engine instead of just a cost engine? So we'll sell more stuff, right? Sell more things to the call center. So now we can have a return on investment. And there's a place and time for that too. But I feel like there's an opportunity to be an insight engine for the organization. Again, in the same way social media, you can have anything come up in social media. I'm posting because I just walked into a store and that I had an experience and I want to convey it, right? Like, there's so many things you don't necessarily know that the consumer is going to vocalize and articulate. In the same way social media can be that, I think the call center can and should be that. And you can extrapolate more because, social media, it's generally one way. I'm making a post and that post is about, an experience I had. But if I was having that same conversation with a call center representative, that rep could try to dig a little bit deeper into, well, where were you and what did you, and use that to better inform the insight. It's just an untapped opportunity that I just don't know that enough organizations are really recognizing.
So if we've determined how we're listening, what should we be listening for? Whenever you're listening to customer feedback, what are key things that people are listening for whenever a customer's speaking?
Well, I think that sometimes depends on the department too. So when I say that, marketing is listening for things like the price or the mention of competitors, that kind of thing, right? Because it's in their vested interest. If I need to change who we position our next ad against, I need to know who are we competing against, that kind of thing. So sometimes I think it's biased from the jump in terms of the department who's doing the listening. They're listening for those things that they know are necessary for them to do their job properly. But what about all of the other elements of that we likely could be missing? If in the call center perspective, we're listening for quality assurance. Did they say things in the sequence we expect? Did they leverage the empathy, as you mentioned? But what about all of the other things that had nothing to do with the call center and the call, all of the context that was given and the experience that was conveyed? I would say that's, I do think that listening can be a little too prescriptive with regards to, I know what I want to hear, or I know what I don't want to hear. And I've got, my check boxes that I need to check off. And we're not necessarily exploring that data recognizing how rich that data is. Let's just talk about, this is the best first party data you can get. Nobody else has this data. Nobody else is going to have the calls from your call center. I don't know of a more competitively differentiating data set that exists.
And somebody needs to listen to those.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So if I want to be compelling and be differentiating, I should be analyzing that data. And again, my competitors can't get their hands on that. Analysts can't get it's only mine and mine alone.
Yeah.
So we're just talking about a really rich amount of first party data, which we are in a world now where first party data is kind of the key to the kingdom. So mine it appropriately.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I don't know how far we are in the podcast, somebody tell me, but I think we've made it pretty far without saying AI, but I'm going to go ahead and do it now.
All right.
So if, is AI going to change this? Or is just how we collect feedback is going to be the same, and AI is something we do in other departments and it's in automation and things like that, and it's not really about this? Or what are your thoughts on AI?
I think this is ripe for AI. Again, you have this idea of I can feed to this corpus of information terms I know I want to go listen to, right? I want to know when people are mentioning a competitor. But the things I didn't know to go and ask, that's where particularly large language models are really, really compelling, because they've been trained on such a large corpus of data. They didn't have to be trained on a specific term. So if someone were to enter or start to convey something that wasn't in your original data set, the LLMs have been trained on it. And this is where I think the nuance of listening becomes really important, particularly as it relates to analyzing that data. It's one thing to go and tell the data, I want to understand this topic and tell me the results. It's different when you say, let the data tell you what's inside of it, right?
Right.
The data is informing you, you're not informing the data.
Yeah.
And that's where large language models specifically, I think, really have the opportunity to help organizations quickly get to leveraging this untapped, unstructured, large amount of data in ways that we've never really been able to do and scale in the past.
Sure.
So you can't really have this story around incremental insights and not include AI as the mechanism and the tool to help get you there.
Right. Yeah, that's what we've seen as well. That primarily in the past, people have used all of this data that they have, usually from tools like speech analytics and things where a full transcript is available of every phone call, every email, every chat with a customer. And it's very easy to go put labels on buckets. Mm-hmm. And I define, like you said, I'm just like, these are all the calls about this, these are all the calls about that, mm-hmm. these are all the, but what if there are buckets that I don't even know the labels of yet?
Yeah.
And what we've typically seen is that every customer that we've worked with, that we've shown them something, they were like, no, we don't take calls like that, or
mm-hmm.
we don't see customers give us that kind of feedback. And we're like, well, would you like to play the tape?
Yeah,
because we can listen to it right now.
Yes.
And what we've seen is that customers of AWS's solutions and customer service in general, they're looking for intent. They want to know they chose to call, they chose to chat, they chose to reach out. Why did they do that? And typically we would love to think that most of that is to buy something, mm-hmm. or something went wrong, whether it was, my flight got canceled or my power is not working or whatever they're calling a call center for. But customers also call for things beyond what we put them in those buckets to call. And mm-hmm. In some of the research that you've done at AWS recently, what are some trends that you're seeing in what customers can uncover about intent and maybe even what AI is revealing to them beyond just, beyond the buckets that they know that they have labels for?
So without getting in, I guess, too specific in terms of what individual accounts have seen, I would tell you one area that we see a lot is the mention of channels. So what I mean by that is someone will articulate, I was trying to do this on your mobile app. I was attempting to do XYZ in your retail store. Like, they talk about the different channels that they have engaged with. Now, you could take that even further. Was that the channel that their channel of choice? That's that where they want to be engaging and that's where they would rather be doing transacting, and now I've had to come over to your call center because I couldn't do something. I think the idea around channel need and channel expectations is number one, right? So just because I called the call center, I am going to talk about other channels that I engaged with. So I'd say that's probably the largest area of opportunity, which had nothing to do with the call center, right? They just happened to be the feeder for the customer couldn't accomplish something. So that's number one. Number two is individuals, particularly when you have like a brick and mortar experience where there is a physical human involved. If there's a physical human that's been involved outside of the person taking that call, they're going to talk about, I had to deal with your store associate. They were rude to me. They were whatever those things might be. Like, there's real insight and feedback with regards to the person that they had to engage with, and maybe it wasn't pleasant, or maybe it was pleasant. Like, I know people tend to veer on the side of only negative things get posted online or only negative things get conveyed over. That's not the case. Some people can be very complimentary as well for someone who was remarkably helpful. I think that is actually really important when we think about NPS. So we talked about surveys. We know at this stage that there are industries that game NPS. When they know they've had a great transaction with a customer who's come into a store, those are the people who get flagged to take that NPS survey, right? Like, it's remarkably gamed. Or
is there anything else I could have done to not get 10s today?
Exactly. Precisely right. But in this, kind of forum where it's just open, I could actually get more feedback, unbiased feedback, that maybe that experience wasn't great, or the people who did not get the opportunity to do the NPS survey because they weren't selected, right? They're giving you really great feedback. So that's another area that has, I would say, a significant amount of opportunity, and that we see present itself over and over now. It's channels, and then it's humans I've interacted with.
Very interesting.
Which have nothing to do with the call center, right?
No,
it's not,
absolutely.
that's the point, right?
They're talking
that
about
is the
a
point.
physical store. They're talking about another employee. They're
Yes.
talking about a product. They're talking about a competitor.
They're talking about,
Yeah.
I wish that you would do X, Y, and Z in this channel. Like they are
Yeah.
giving you product ideas.
Somebody should be listening.
Yes,
to
exactly. You don't have to reinvent the wheel or guess.
Yeah.
Like they might convey all of those things to you.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to mine the data.
I would think that would be extremely beneficial if you have brick and mortar. Let's talk about some industries here. First of all, if you think about in financial services, obviously banks typically will have physical locations where they might be talking and giving feedback in other channels. You mentioned retail a little bit. What about some other industries that you're seeing some any interesting trends that you see? Especially, I think of the trend right now. It seems like most of the interactions that I personally have that I'm just like, oh, I'm going to walk away speechless. It might be in healthcare, because it's personal to me and it's confusing to me. Any trends in the healthcare space that you've seen that involve that type of listening?
Well, I think there's obviously, you have to be careful there because of all of the HIPAA requirements. But I would say back to the human piece of it, because there are so many individuals that are involved in healthcare, your specialist or your practitioner or whomever, kind of being able to get back to the source of which of these was maybe a point of failure. I think that would probably be the most conveying or the most prominent in healthcare, at least today. And again, also recognizing that healthcare can be very challenging for many customers to even navigate. So understanding the source of some of the challenges, again, not necessarily with the provider here, but maybe a provider another provider. I would say that's probably one of the biggest opportunities that we see in healthcare.
Okay. So where are people going to get the value? So let's say I'm listening, whether that's I'm collecting feedback or I'm analyzing every interaction that comes and I'm looking at customers' intent and, why did they call? Why did they do that? Where do I go to get the value out of that data? Who's going to take that and run with it?
It's never the same person, right? I mean, at the end of that's what makes it so complex, right? So you have to mine that data and then you have to identify, well, who's the right person to get this to? And it's never going to be one person.
Sure.
And this is where I think automation starts to play a really important role with regards to getting it to the right team, really operationalizing those insights in a way so that you can categorically understand where they need to go. So if we were talking about the store associate, perhaps that's the store manager. If you can get down to the exact store that somebody was in, maybe the store manager needs to have, some insights into what's happening there. Then you have things related to product, right? So if I give you an idea of perhaps something I've seen in another industry and I'd like to see it here, now go to the company that has multiple products. Which product team do you go to? I mean, it really is, there is no one size fits all. But I think, again, this is where you can be a little bit more prescriptive with thematically. If these thematic types of things come in, this is where it gets directed through automation. But there is no one team, I think, that is the source of all of it. That said, you do have to have that feedback loop at some level, right? If we're talking about listening to customer data and it's call data and that data needs to be, sent out, there has got to be some type of feedback loop with regards to what did we do with all of that data once we got it? And was there action that needed to be taken? There's the reporting, I think, that needs to be kind of maybe centralized, but who does the actual execution and even the root cause? That those teams can be all across the entire organization.
Well, here's my vision. My vision would be that there aren't just key stakeholders and they have a login and they can log in whenever they want and they can hear what customers are saying. My vision would be that we would just be able to understand, like, this bit of insight would benefit this person. Who is that person? And maybe I've never met the person that runs our mobile app. I've never met the website team. I don't know who cleans the restrooms at the retail store. I don't know. But somebody, that information somewhere. So if we could attach the stakeholder with the insight, then it isn't a matter of, well, I'm going into my tool and I'm going to log in. It's more of, hey, in my inbox today, or text message to me, or here, would you like to listen to some feedback? It might be, I could almost subscribe to it, like I subscribe to this podcast.
Yes,
I subscribe to this is what I'm worried about, and when those insights come along, and there's more than just one, and
I
it's
want
a
to be
trend,
notified.
I want to be notified. I want to hear every single time someone says, "I wish I coulda," and "I wish your mobile app," those phrases. And I would love to see maybe if AI could take every job description and just say, these people with these job descriptions would like this insight. One time very early on, I want to say this is maybe 16, 17 years ago, I was demoing speech analytics to a group of executives. And I gave my demo, and I was like super proud of all these insights I was showing them about their business. And I said, see, I was like, even you'll be able to just log in and do that. And I remember this woman in the back, she raised her hand and she was like, Matt, first of all, I will never log into a system like this. And I was like, okay, thank you. She goes, but thank you, because now I know there will be people in my organization that can't.
Okay.
It's like, I'm not going to go in and find calls or find trends or do Six Sigma projects on, to reduce defects in a process. But now that I know somebody in my organization can. And I thought that was really, so how could we envision what that person wants and then just serve it up to them on a silver platter every day, every hour, whatever it might be, so that they can see those insights.
In some ways, you need to understand the intent of the worker. And what their job to be done is, and then being able to do some type of pattern matching on when the insights that are fed in. But I love the idea of opting into it, right? Allow me the autonomy to go in and opt into themes that I care about, or themes I'm just interested in knowing about.
Sure.
I love that idea, and giving more power to the user. In this case, it's the employee, but yeah. But I think that's the nice to have. I think the other one is the must have. And the must haves are those things that are critical, those things that are suddenly causing a spike in calls, those things that are starting to bring your brand, kind of your brand score down on social media, right? Because the sentiment isn't there. There are some things that are more must haves, and I need to get this to the right person quickly, versus those that are kind of cursory. So I do think you have to put those in two separate buckets.
Yeah. So if people are listening and they're thinking, I need a AI quick win. I see this. I could see the idea of letting AI give me what I need to see, as opposed to being led by the leading the witness, if you will. And what did you call it? Something from the jump.
I mean, leading the witness from the jump. Like there's bias
from
in
the jump,
even
exactly.
like the question you're asking, right? If we're using traditional methods. It's the things you don't know to ask sometimes. There's things you have to know, but things that that you didn't know to ask. Like those are the opportunities. Yeah.
So if from the jump I would like to see this information come to me, what do I tackle first? I mean, if I were going to put together the business case to use AI to listen to customers better, to take the insights that we're already collecting and do more with them, and you said, well, this is where we typically see customers get the most bang for their buck, if you will.
Yeah.
Is it employee related? Is it product related? Is it competitive? Is it with marketing, or is it with people?
It's going to depend on the data source, I think. But as an example, if I had to start, where would you start? I recently met with a company, and they shared with me that of their calls that came in, and they have pre-built categories. So categorically, what are these kind of themes? 40% of their calls could not have any theme attached to them, had no theme attached to them at all. So 40%. I would start there. Like, I mean, that seems obvious, but again, they're not saying the things you know to listen for. Okay, and everyone discards it, right? Like we always say, and I know this happens a lot in social media, that's all noise. Like that's the noise of the data. There's real richness in some of that noise if you know how to use it. And I think that's the part that the first step is identifying what's the first one to go after. Though anything that did not get categorized, I think is probably logical. And And then it's a matter of actioning on that data. Not all of the data, or not all of the insights that you're going to get, can you take action on? I don't necessarily know the formula for that, Matt. Like, is it actionable or is it not? I think that would be a really great exercise in like discovery. Just if now that I have this piece of information, what could I use it for? So I think the actionability of the data has to be kind of part of this process. But I would start, those that you are getting, you can't categorize. If other brands are in a similar place and it's 40%, like let's start there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I often say that sometimes the best experience that I can have that would completely leave me speechless would be to have no experience. The best experience that I have with my airline when I travel, and I travel frequently, is whenever I have none. That I check in online. I'm
you're
not
green
even
as
really
the grass can be, and you
Exactly.
have you have expectations, but you don't really know what you're getting in for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the best interaction I have with my airline is when I don't need to go to the gate. I don't need to talk with anyone. I hopefully get upgraded. Or it's just that when my flight get canceled, that I'm automatically on the next flight, and so it's usually these outliers of things that, I'm going to have to talk with someone. That's where I typically see, and what we've seen is customers will take a group of interactions and say, how can we talk about call avoidance and call deflection and self-service and how can we help customers self-serve, and that's great. But how can it just not exist? Like this group of interactions and these experiences, I want to deliver the best experience by hopefully just never having these discussions before. That we were working with a utility company and they were listening to their interactions to say, okay, whenever a new activation of service happens and someone has to call in, something failed along the way. So what was that? Was it in the expectations we gave the customer? Was it in documentations? Was it in how it was worded in the alert that they got that the technician was on their way?
Yeah.
Was it in their first bill? What drove them to have an interaction? And if that can be circumvented, often it's like, wow, I love my electric company because I don't think I've ever had to talk to my electric company. That's usually the best interaction. Any things in the industries that you talk to where they're actually just, hey, the best interaction is to not have one?
I mean, this is a little bit leans into what we first talked about. What is good listening look like, or listen like, or sound like? What does good listening sound like? And there's so much that's happening in the world of smart products and devices, where I can now collect that telemetry and I can identify an anomaly of some kind. And if I can identify quickly that this is the source of that anomaly, and whether it is to dispatch some type of bug fix or something, or to get a call center rep to do an outbound call, like how can I get ahead of the call to happen? That is where we see, and I know this is a little bit outside of just the call itself, but that is listening as well. Like, are you listening to the product that I have purchased and it has a need for me, or in your case, utilities, your smart meter, right? Is there an anomaly that's coming off of that smart meter that we can intercept? We can identify this is the root cause, and whether the customer even has to know, right? Like that's the part where you solve the issue before the customer has to engage you. I think that's, ideal for everybody. So for us, it's definitely, as an AWS, we do a lot in the world of IoT, and that is where I think we see a lot of opportunity. Again, whether that be smart products, smart services, whatever those are. We think smart cars, but every smart device, right? Like it's collecting that telemetry data and being able to action it, maybe so that the customer never even knows that there was an issue.
True.
Yeah.
That is the dream.
That's the dream. Yeah. That's the dream.
I often say that we're not here to bash on brands, but if one deserves the praise, let's talk about it. So the example to me that happened to me personally is my wife and I visited a Crate and Barrel. We ordered a couple chairs. They weren't in stock. We actually chose custom fabric for it. And they said, it's going to be like, I don't remember, 8 to 10 weeks or something like that before you'll have them. And the next day, I remember getting this alert that I had a package on my front door. And I'm like, I'm not expecting anything. And I went and I opened up the package, and inside the package was a swatch of the fabric that we had chosen and a letter that said, hey, guess what? The most common reason why people return custom furniture is because the color doesn't look right whenever you actually get it in the light of your house. And so we haven't started building your chairs yet, but we will probably in 24 to 48 hours. So if you're really sure, just let us know. Or if you're not sure once you see it in the light, then let us know. And I remember standing there in my entry hall looking at this swatch and this letter, like, who spent an overnight FedEx envelope of a swatch and this letter to, for these? And I thought, well, someone did the math. Someone did that telemetry, and they said, okay, all right, why do people return, custom furniture?
Yeah.
Well, it's not because they didn't like the color. It's because it doesn't look right in their home. Oh, okay. Well, what is the cost if that actually gets returned? Okay, well, that costs this. And someone did the math and said it's worth that.
Yeah.
And then even after getting the furniture, that day we got an email from the CEO or something that said how to clean our chairs and if we had any questions about them. It was very, very personal. Have you ever seen an experience like that just blew you away? Or who was doing who did the math there to make that work?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, somebody listened to all of those calls, or they tracked all of those, returns, and they realized there is an opportunity here for us to not have an investment in cost. So I think everything that we've talked about here in terms of digging deeper into the why, and you had to go through all that data to get there, turned out to be a great ROI for Crate and Barrel and for you. And you had a great experience.
I did.
Did you keep it?
I did.
Okay,
yeah,
the color worked well.
They were great chairs. Yes, they were. Yeah. So as we kind of close up things here today, as we think about listening for the good and the bad and the ugly, what final thoughts would you have with someone who was embarking on that? How do we just go beyond single-digit surveys? Some of this, the research that you've done around collecting feedback. What does someone do right now that's going to impact their 2025?
Well, first of all, I would just say, particularly for anyone who's looking at exploring large language models, you have customer data. You have customer feedback, whether that be through calls, whether that be through the surveys that you mentioned and that unstructured data, whether that be through product reviews, whether that be through emails, right? You have a lot of unstructured customer data of them talking to you. It's a great place to start. It's a great playground to begin with. By the way, that's all your data as well, right? So we talked about this earlier. It's not using anybody else's data. It's your data. Sure. We have done surveys with our customers to understand how they intend to leverage generative AI. And one of the biggest use cases among line of business is to leverage it for customer data, customer feedback, unstructured data. So you have to get that into a format with which you can do your analysis. But that is the number one use case that we see thus far for LLMs. So for all the reasons that we already talked about. I would say explore, right? It's your data. Obviously, you want to make sure that you're not putting all of that proprietary data into something that's more public, like a public LLM. You want to make sure that you're adhering to all of the privacy and compliance procedures that your organization has. But it's a great place to start. And then start just questioning that data and question it from the standpoint of there's some prompt engineering that would need to go into that. So prompting it for what were the themes that were, most common around our mobile app, something like that. So you have to tune your prompts, but I think it's a great place to start. And you might start quickly seeing what is the incremental insight that you can gain outside of just seeing words and text, right? I want to see context around that text. I think that's a great place. And a lot of companies are starting to do that now. Now, the call center piece of it is a little bit more challenging because you have to transcribe, because it's, very long dialogue. There are some nuances there to be considered. But there's nothing, I think, at this point preventing anyone from getting to this, letting the data inform you versus you informing the data. Sure. The tools are there. It's a matter of getting it into a format where you can feed it into an engine and then asking it to give you the information that you don't know. Sure. And we've done that with several companies, writing prompts for themes that were, what themes appeared this month that weren't there last month. That's a great prompt for seeing a delta. Or things that, what were in the last 3 months of data that weren't in the, 3 months prior to that. Like those start to really uncover like what are some of the nuances that maybe we haven't been able to uncover before.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the beauty, without being too much a plug for AWS, is that if you have all that data and you own it all, and again, talking governance and security and things like that, you have all of the data, you have the tools within the AWS family like Bedrock and others to pull that together. We typically encourage people to just start small. Just take 30 days worth of customer interactions and just say a simple prompt like, why do people call? And it's it's surprising both the major intents of why people do, and then down to those that you're like, we have no label for this bucket.
Yeah.
We have no idea why they're calling.
And that's a good thing, right? So it's, now we're starting to uncover. One element I would say that I do see more and more in this area would be an ontologist. Somebody who understands the vernacular and the ontology of a business becomes really important, particularly someone who can discern language in general. I think that becomes a really important role that we aren't necessarily talking about enough. I mean, the engines can give us back the data, but we need someone who has a command of language to really help us. These are the same things, or these are the opposite things. So I think that's one, if I had to say of a job area that I think is an opportunity, would be some element of ontology, and being just a command of communication and language.
Yeah.
Right.
And having language, and then creating a partnership or that relationship with someone who has the business acumen of, that knows the products, knows pricing models, they know maybe the other department heads, and then they can pull that together and say, oh, that insight belongs here and that insight belongs to another person.
Yeah, I think that's the next step is that automation, getting it to the person or the persons who can action that or decide we can't action that, or maybe it needs to be taken to another level. The actioning of that, what its insight is, I guess there's data and then there's the insight and then there's the action on that insight. I still think that's a part that we all have an opportunity to explore more and figure out what is actionable or not. But I think that's just how this entire area will grow now that we can at least get our hands on some of that unstructured data.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being the first guest on Speechless.
Thank you for having me.
We
Happy to be
appreciate that.
it. Yeah.
Listen in again for some more speechless things that are happening in customer experience, and we'll see you next time.